Ladies and gentlemen, on today's episode, Abu Garcia teases a reel that seems a little off-brand, but in a good way. We talk about our favorite Ned Rig soft plastic worms, Major League Fishing announces a new video game, and we talk about our top 3 favorite jerkbaits, castable sonar pods, chatterbait tips, and more on today's episode of Tackle Talk.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bill Dance, and you're listening to Tackle Talk.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast, brought to you by The Rod Locker. Premium gear and expert advice from a staff you can trust. Now, here's your host, Andrew Hayes.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Tackle Talk Podcast. I appreciate you all joining us today. As always, at the top of the show, we have to give a huge thank you to the folks over at The Rod Locker. They are our title sponsor here at the Tackle Talk Podcast. They are the reason that you are able to listen to the Tackle Talk Podcast every single week. We wouldn't be able to do it without Brian, Chad, and the whole crew over at The Rod Locker. Last week, we gave you an incredible deal. Buy one, get one free Shimano Zodius rods. A mind-bogglingly good deal that I could not believe was real when Brian told me the first time. And since that episode dropped, probably within the first couple hours, you guys sold out like half of the different models that they had on that sale. Like, I logged in first thing in the morning when I woke up on Tuesday after that episode dropped. I think they had 12 models available that you could choose from. When I woke up, there were only like 5 or 6 left. So you guys are incredible. The reach of this show and you guys, the listeners, never cease to amaze me. It is awesome to watch you guys jump on these great deals. It just makes me feel good knowing that you guys saved a bunch of money. Another way that you can save a ton of money with the Rod Locker is to follow their Facebook page, because they've been doing what they call Wild Card Wednesdays, where they've been marking down used gear, like 3 or 4 pieces every single week, and they do a video on it to show you what those special deals are. So like last week, Wild Card Wednesday was 2 different reels, a Shimano SLX DC 151. They had it on sale for something silly like $136, very, very lightly used. They also had a used Fluger Tryon on sale for $31.99. So you had a casting reel, a spinning reel, and then on the rod side, they had a lightly used Dobyns Champ XP 734C. That is the rod that everybody wants out of that Champ XP lineup. They had that on sale for $167. And then they had a used St. Croix Victory on sale for $159. So those are crazy deals. All you got to do, follow their Facebook page, and you can get deals like that every single week. I love the folks at the Rod Locker. They have an incredible selection of both new and used fishing gear. You get great customer service, fast shipping, all from 2 stand-up guys that own the Rod Locker and a great crew over there in Evansville, Indiana. So go check them out over at www.rodlocker.com. And as always, you can use our code TACKLETALKAPRIL, all one word. TACKLETALKAPRIL is going to save you an extra 5% off your order. It's sales stackable. Basically, everything on the website is included with that code TACKLETALKAPRIL over at www.rodlocker.com. All right, everybody, let's get into the episode here today. If I sound kind of stuffy, welcome to allergy season. I got smacked in the face with it this past week, and it shows no signs of stopping. So I apologize in advance for this week and probably the next couple weeks, because it doesn't seem to be leaving anytime soon. I have been stuffier than all get out the past like week or so. So I will try and keep the sniffles and the sneezing to a minimum. I will cut those out when those happen. But again, if it sounds a little weird, allergy season is kicking me in the tail. But let's move on to some news here. The very first thing we have here today comes to us from Major League Fishing. And the article that I'm going to read here really fast, or at least a snippet of the article, is from Joe Albanese over at Wired to Fish. He reports Major League Fishing wants anglers to have the same fun that they can when they hit the lake with the upcoming launch of Major League Fishing Pro Catch. MLF says this new competitive fishing simulator is designed to mirror the strategy and decision-making of real-world tournament angling. The game is scheduled to launch first on Steam in June 2026, with additional releases planned for Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, Xbox, and Meta VR platforms throughout 2026 and 2027. Unlike traditional arcade-style video games, Major League Fishing says they developed Pro Catch to focus on realism. Players will fish a range of environments from freshwater lakes to coastal waters, all modeled after real-world fisheries. Conditions with the game are dynamic. Weather patterns shift, Light levels change throughout the day, and wind direction impacts the fish, both positioning and feeding. As a result, players must constantly adjust their approach. This includes selecting the right presentation, managing equipment, and making strategic decisions to stay competitive. The goal is to replicate the unpredictability anglers face on the water, where patterns evolve and adaptability is key. The game includes more than 40 fish species, each built with distinct behavior patterns based on how those species feed, move, and fight. From bass to trout to offshore species, players will need to tailor their tactics depending on the target. Each fish is powered by AI designed to create variable fights, meaning no two catches play out the same way. According to Major League Fishing, the game is designed to reflect the same competitive mindset seen on the Bass Pro Tour. Players are challenged to think strategically and respond to changing conditions rather than relying on repetitive gameplay. In addition to solo modes, MLF Pro Catch will feature online tournaments, global leaderboards, and recurring in-game challenges. The games will also introduce live tournaments and real-world prizes, adding a higher level of competition compared to traditional fishing titles. So, Major League Fishing is coming out with a video game that it says will eventually be available on Nintendo Switch, PlayStation, Xbox, and Meta VR. That wasn't on my bingo card anytime soon, but apparently that's a real thing that is going to happen in the near future. So I'm not a big video game guy. I don't own a single video game console, to be honest. I would much rather go real fishing than pretend fishing from my living room, but to each their own. If you are a video game aficionado out there and you like fishing, then maybe this is a fun mashup for you, but just a very interesting article it came across that I did not see coming. Okay, everybody, next up here on the show today, we actually have new, legitimately exciting news from Abu Garcia. Yes, stop the presses. Abu Garcia, the brand that has seemingly been stagnant or even slipping for years because other than maybe the Xenon, which I still think was awesome but overpriced, you haven't really got much out of Abu Garcia in terms of new exciting gear recently. Well, they recently changed that. And that's because Abu Garcia just announced 2 new reels that are completely different from anything that Abu Garcia has ever made in its history. Because apparently Abu Garcia has been lurking in the background, working in secret on 2 new reels that honest to goodness make me do a double take when I see them coming out from Abu Garcia. And that is because they are digital reels. So yes, Abu Garcia has made not only 1, but 2 new reels that feature technology and features that I did not see coming from Abu, but here we are. So Abu Garcia announced 2 new reels. They're Voltic reels. I think that's how you say it. It's spelled like Volt IQ, VOLTIQ, but I think it's pronounced Voltic. But either way, we get 2 new reels here, and it looks like they've taken 2 of their popular reels, so the Revo X, the Revo SX, and they've offered updates to those reels that feature this digital braking system. So not a completely new body and not completely new specs and everything, but a new braking system built on 2 platforms that they already have, the Revo X and the Revo SX. So let's take a look at some pricing here. The new Revo X Volt IQ is listed at $199. It is light silver, again, built on the Revo X platform. The Revo X regular version is $129, so it looks like you're probably paying about a $70 upgrade to get the Voltic version of the Revo X. The Revo X Voltic is listed at 0.3 ounces heavier than the regular version, so I think the regular X is 7.3, the new Voltic is 7.6. So a little bit heavier, but it looks like the specs on both of these versions, the second one I'll talk about here in a second, are pretty much exactly the same. The same max drag, the same inches per turn, like all that stuff is really staying the same except for weight, because obviously you're getting a new braking system inside, which weighs different than the old braking system, and then the braking system itself having a DC chip in there to have a digital reel versus a, magnetic or centrifugal braking system. So that's the Revo X Voltic. Now we get the Revo SX Voltic, which is $249. Now the Revo SX Voltic is a dark silver. The Revo X Voltic is a light silver. It's going to be the easy way to tell these 2 apart. The Revo SX regular version is $189. So if you want to go up to the Voltic version now of the SX, you're going to be looking at a $60 upgrade. and it's a 0.4 ounce difference in weight. So the Voltic version, this brand new version, the DC version is 0.4 ounces heavier. Your regular SX is 7.4 ounces. The new version is 7.8 ounces with that digital braking system. So if you want to look at the braking system itself, it says it has 10 braking settings on it. You've got settings 1 through 3, which it calls Pro Mode. And it says settings 1 through 3 feature a pause in braking that allows the spool to reach maximum RPMs before engagement, delivering a boosted casting distance over competing digital systems. So that's modes 1 through 3. Then if you go to settings 4 through 6, that's what it calls the sweet spot. And it says settings 4 through 6 represent the sweet spot for most anglers and most presentations. The optimal mix of control and distance, perfect for all-around use. And then as you crank up the settings from there, you get to settings 7 through 9, which it calls the advanced control, which it says that settings 7 through 9 apply more brake during the acceleration and deceleration, ideal for windier conditions, larger baits, and heavier line. And then you have setting number 10, which is maximum. It says setting 10 delivers maximum braking for the ultimate assist with big baits in high winds. So on one hand, digital braking systems have been around for decades. I think Shimano released the first digital braking system legitimately like 20 years ago. I think the Antares DC was introduced around 2006. So the concept has been around for a long time. I'm not giving Abu Garcia credit for doing something insanely groundbreaking here, but I do want to give them credit and props for actually sticking their neck out and putting out something that is new and modern and sleek and techy and just overall out of the ordinary for Abu Garcia, which I do appreciate. Now, here's the fun part. I worked some magic and I was able to get my hands on one of these reels early. So I have it in my hand right now as I sit here at the desk. And as soon as I get this episode recorded, I will be spooling it up to start playing with it. So rather than do an initial review or unboxing or whatever everybody else does, I want to put my time in with this reel like I try to do with all of our gear reviews on the show and give you a thorough, honest review once I feel like I've put it through the paces. So the trade-off there is you don't get the review as fast. You're going to have 10,000 other, initial reviews or unboxings or whatever showing you this reel before we're going to get to it. But the trade-off is that you hopefully get a more honest, more experienced review, just regular Joe out there using this reel, what I like and what I don't like. And that takes time. That's not something you can do in 12 hours or 24 hours. You need like weeks and weeks and weeks with this reel in different conditions, in different situations. I mean, you just physically cannot test durability on a reel if you just got that reel like 2 days ago. That's just not a thing that happens. So it takes time to test these things and to form opinions on these things. I promise you at some point in the, somewhat near future, hopefully, we'll be getting a review on this Abu Garcia Revo SX Voltic. And again, if it is Volt IQ, I guess, and I've been saying Voltic like an idiot this whole time, I apologize. I think that's how you say it, Voltic, but it's VOLTIQ, the new reel coming out from Abu Garcia. And as someone who I'm well aware likes to take a dump on Abu Garcia from time to time because I feel like their product line and their brand has just gotten stale over the past year or two, it's refreshing to see something so out of left field from a brand like Abu Garcia. Okay, let's keep moving here. We're going to get to the fishing pole here in just a second. I do have a fun one for you guys this week. But before we do, the fishing pole and the Tackle Talk podcast are brought to you in part by Humminbird. And I'm not sure if any sonar company out there has had a bigger last year than Humminbird has because of the introduction of their incredibly popular Explore series of fish finders and graphs that just have got rave reviews since their release. Humminbird kept what Humminbird does best, mainly incredible sonar, but they also rewrote the Humminbird book on menu navigation, waypoint management, and the overall user interface with these new Explore units, and that's what makes them so awesome. So they come in 3 sizes, 9 inches, 10 inches, and 12 inches. They obviously handle 2D, Mega Down, Mega Side imaging. They're compatible with Mega Live 2, which is their forward-facing sonar. They come complete with Lake Master and Coast Master maps included, which is a huge benefit. And they can connect to Minn Kota products and you can control them on demand. All of that from a great, easy-to-use line of fish finders that start at $14.99. So for more information on the Explore series of fish finders, you can head over to www.humminbird.com/explore. That's humminbird.com/XPLORE. The Tackle Talk podcast is also brought to you in part by Minn Kota. And today, let's shine the spotlight on a workhorse trolling motor for years that anglers have relied on, the Terrova. There are so many options in that Terrova family. You have, I think, 4 different shaft lengths. You have regular brushed motors. You have Quest brushless trolling motors. You have options to come fully equipped with like mega down and mega side imaging or dual spectrum chirp sonar. I think there's 3 different voltages that you can choose from in the Terrova lineup. You've got 12 volt, 24 volt, 36 volts. So no matter what battery you have a Terrova to match it. The Terrova is just as tough as the anglers who fish it. And it all starts at $1749 for a brushed 54-inch 12-volt trolling motor in that family, and then you can work your way up from there. And I promise you, whatever you need, whatever budget, whatever type of water you're fishing, there is a Minn Kota for you. Whether it's basic or insanely advanced with like tech-heavy features, see for yourself why so many anglers trust Minn Kota to get them where they need to go. So for more information, you can head over to www.minnkotamotors.com.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast Fishing Pole. Brought to you by Minn Kota. Adventure awaits at minnkota.com.
All right, folks, today in the fishing pole, I have a fun one. We've got a bait that on the surface just seems so simple, but in reality, there are now like 5,000 different options out there for this small niche space. And I think it's worth examining some of the different options that are out there and discussing some of our favorites. And that bait is the good old Ned Rig worm. So my question to you all this week is, what's your favorite Ned Rig worm? And worm is part of this. So it's not Ned Rig bait. We're not looking for Ned Rig crawls or Ned Rig creature baits, but Ned Rig worms specifically. And this is fun because Ned Rig worms, like on the surface, seem like, oh, there's just a billion things that are all exactly the same. When you have something so small and so finessey like a Ned Rig, the tiniest little differences make a big difference out there on the water with how this bait performs and how it acts, especially when you're fishing these worms on such light jig heads and light line. Small, minuscule differences do have a huge impact. So we're going to talk about some of my favorites, and then we'll look at what you guys said for your favorites. But really straightforward Ned Rig worms, if you had to pick one, what's your favorite? And I think this is actually a lot tougher question to answer than you'd think, especially now. If you'd asked this question like, 5 or 10 years ago, completely different answers here because there weren't so many options. The Ned Rig is no longer this, niche Midwest technique. It has gone full mainstream. It's nationwide. Everybody is hip to the Ned Rig now, and you probably couldn't say the same thing like 10 or 20 years ago. So now we've taken what used to be a stupidly simple bait and technique, and every single company has made their own version of a Ned Rig bait. And when you have 500 different companies making their own version of something, some of those are bound to kind of push the limits and boundaries. And that's kind of what we've got in the Ned Rig world lately. Companies are making different sizes, different textures, different exterior, ribbings and different materials to perform differently, different appendages, the whole 9 yards. So it just means that now we have so many more options for Ned Rigs than we ever did before. And then that leads us back to our original question, which is, with so many options out there, which ones are really the best? So I'm going to give you my favorite Ned Rig worms of all time in no particular order. I'm going to give you a couple so that if you don't agree with me on one, maybe there's another one that you do. I'm going to list off probably 3 or 4 that I really like out there on the market right now. First up, you can't have the Ned Rig conversation without Z-Man. And Z-Man has the OG Ned Rig worm, the TRD, which stands for the real deal, which I still don't really understand why it's called the real deal. I think it's just more in my mind like TRD looks like turd, and that's basically what this little worm looks like under the water, is a stubby little turd in there. But the Z-Man TRD is kind of the default or standard for Ned Rigs, I guess. Partly because it's a great product, partly because Z-Man is the brand that worked with Ned Katie to popularize and kind of commercialize the Ned Rig to the masses over the past decade or so. But here's my hot take. The regular TRD isn't that great. The regular, standard, tiny 2.75-inch version is just not something that I throw a lot. Instead, I throw the big TRD, the 4-inch version. I just think with that little extra, inch and a quarter, gives you so much more movement and slither to that bait where the regular 275 has like zero flow or movement of that tail at all. It's just sort of a log or a nub down there that you're throwing. And I know that that definitely works. I know that's part of its charm and part of the reason why people love it so much. But I do want my worm to have some sort of worm aesthetics to it. So I like that the tail on the big TRD will wiggle just a little bit more. When you're hopping it, you get a little bit more of that kind of like, arched worm look to it. You get a little bit of wiggle out of that tail. It also helps keep the bluegill away a little bit when you're throwing the regular TRD in a place that has a bunch of panfish. You're going to get bit left and right and short struck all over. The fact that it's 4 inches helps kind of keep some of those smaller fish at bay. I do feel like the big TRD seems to do a better job of just targeting a little bit bigger fish because of that size difference. So the big TRD is on my list for sure. The next one is going to be also kind of an ElaZtech-y type material. That's the JERKBAITS Zaza Super Ned. Now, these are a lot more expensive. They're like $8.49 for an 8-pack, so over $1 a bait, which is crazy. That part sucks, but they are durable as all get out. You cannot hurt these things. One JERKBAIT will last me like, weeks as long as I take care of it and I don't store it bent or let it get melted or anything like that. But the Zaza Super Ned from Nico are similar to the Z-Man. It's that sort of super stretchy, almost indestructible material, but they do tend to melt and warp when you put them in boxes with other soft plastics or in hot situations. The one thing that I do like about the Zaza Super Neds is that they are so fat. So when I want like a completely fat, thick, stubby, a little bit faster falling Ned Rig, I reach for something like a Zaza Super Ned from JERKBAITS. I like the fact that it's just a completely different profile than, a Z-Man TRD. A Z-Man TRD is way skinnier than a Zaza Super Ned. This thing is thick. So that is kind of the role that it plays in my tackle box, is just when I want a little bit of a beefier, thicker profile, the JERKBAITS Zaza Super Ned is one that I will reach for. If you're looking for colors, the Zaza Super Neds in Eclipse is definitely my favorite color that they offer. I think they used to do Obsidian. I haven't seen Obsidian so much recently, so I kind of lean toward Eclipse, which is just sort of a dark black, and then right toward the tip of the tail, it fades to this really natural earthworm kind of color. And then my last TPE or ElaZtech type material Ned that I'm going to put on this list is actually the Crush City Ned BLT from Rapala. This bait is awesome. I love the shape. I love that kind of ring fry look to that worm all the way down. It has this cool kind of turtle shell back look to it. I've caught some big fish on the Rapala Crush City Ned BLT. My favorite color there is probably Copper Truce. And this serves as more of like a heavy textured Ned Rig for me. So the Z-Man is slender and smooth. The JERKBAITS is smooth and fat. And now you have your skinnier, more textured outside with the Crush City Ned BLT. So of those three, I think I like the Z-Man best when I'm using it on like really light jig heads and I want a slow fall rate. I think the Nico Zaza Super Ned is more my style when I'm fishing with heavier weights like 3/16 and up on my Ned Rig. And then that Ned BLT, I've also done really well with in cold water for some reason. So winter, late fall, early spring, if that water temp is below 40, then the Crush City Ned BLT has outperformed the Nico for sure, and maybe the Z-Man as well in just water that's that cold. I don't know why, but I've got a lot of fish pictures to prove it, so there might be something to it. So those are our three kind of super stretchy, super durable, premium Ned Rig worms that would make my list. But if you want a dark horse here and just a great, affordable, accessible, middle-of-the-road Ned Rig worm, my pick is actually going to be the Zoom Beatdown Ned worm. Those are 3.25 inches. They are a great middle ground between something like a TRD and a big TRD in terms of size. And they also come in a 10-pack for like $5.49. So far and away, less expensive than almost anything else on our list. And their color selection is a little low for Zoom. Like Zoom usually has a ton of colors in the beatdowns. I think they have 9 colors, but they have all of your staples: green pumpkin, black and blue, electric shad, which is a great natural shad color. And then you have some sneaky colors like Houdini and California 420, which are both great. It's a pretty soft worm, like staying true to Zoom's kind of typical plastics. They are fairly durable with how soft and movable they are, but they're not going to be as durable as the first 3 on our list. You're going to tear a lot more zoom beatdowns than you would any of our first 3. But I just like that it's a very light, skinny Ned worm. And you get a little bit more movement out of this worm than you would with something that's thicker and stubbier, obviously. You can get a little of that kind of back end tail action out of this zoom beatdown, similar to like what you can get with the big TRD, but you get it in a lot smaller, more compact worm at 3.25 inches. So those are my picks. I think my favorite all-around Ned Rig worm at the moment is the zoom beatdown. And I know, like I said, that's a very dark horse pick. There are way more popular baits out there, but that's the one that I have reached for more often than not, especially for the price and when you just want a regular, good, affordable Ned Rig worm. From there, I would say my number 2 is probably the Z-Man Big TRD. Number 3, honest to goodness, might be like a BPS Sticko, just the Bass Pro Shops version, because again, for the price, you cannot beat those. And then I would say down from there, I'd go to the JERKBAITS Zaza Super Ned. Then I would go the Crush City Ned BLT. I'd say that is kind of my top, whatever that is, 5 or 6 worms in the Ned Rig lineup. But I'm very excited to see what you all said, because I feel like the answers are going to be all over the place. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give you whatever the top answer is, and then we'll just go through some honorable mentions and not really do the percentages as much, because there's going to be so many responses here and so many different options. So as I open this up and look at our list of responses here, okay, there definitely is a number 1 answer by far. I don't even have to count. I can just look at the submissions here and scroll down and tell you by far the winner is the Z-Man TRD. Like, it's not even close. As I scroll here, it's gotta be like almost half of the responses say Z-Man TRD. So that's your clear winner here. No need for a vote count or a recount or any sort of stats. Just blew the doors off the competition in terms of our submitted answers here through the fishing poll. But almost every one of my picks that I had on here is on here at some point. So I see some submissions for the JERKBAITS Zaza Super Ned. I see the Rapala Ned BLT. I see obviously the Z-Man. I see the Bass Pro versions. Ironically, the one I don't see here as I scroll through, I don't think I'm missing it at all. I don't see the Zoom Beatdown at all. So that's one that's getting no love. And I knew it was going to be like a less popular Ned, but geez, I thought maybe someone would put it in here, but not a single vote for one of my favorites, the Zoom Beatdown. That one hurts a little bit. Some that weren't on my list, you've got the Mule Fishing Bluegrass Bug, submitted a few times. While those people that submitted that no ball, and I appreciate that. Great shout out for the Bluegrass Bug. It's a great bait. I'm going to rule that that is not a Ned Rig worm. That's a little bit more of like a creature bait, bug type situation, but a great bait nonetheless. So shout out to Mule Fishing. That is a fun one, but I don't know if that's going to count toward the worm category. But you've also got some other great baits on here. The Yamamoto Ned Senko is listed a few times. You've got a couple different people saying that they are just cutting a regular Senko in half. That's what I did for the first 2 or 3 years of throwing a Ned Rig. I would just buy the bulk version of the Bass Pro Shops Sticko, just the regular Senko version of it. I would cut those in half. It worked great. You save a ton of money, but you will tear a lot of them after a few fish. So that's your trade-off. And then in here, you've also got some responses for the Robo Worm Ned Worm. That's a fun one. Great option. I see a couple for the 6 Cents Ned Busa. Some really good answers in here. But my goodness, like as I scroll through here, it is just crazy how many responses are for the Z-Man TRD. That is your overwhelming favorite from the Tackle Talk family here. The TRD reigns supreme in this week's fishing poll for your favorite overall Ned Rig worm. All right, everybody, we will get to the mailbag here in just a second. We have some great topics in the mailbag for today's episode. But before we get to that, the Tackle Talk podcast and the mailbag are powered by Amped Outdoors. And let me tell you, as an angler that just has one goal and one goal only, which is to catch fish, there are certain pieces of my equipment that I just need to work at all times, and I never want to have to worry about them. And one of those is my batteries. Whether I'm 5 miles downstream in a fast river and quite literally need my motor to work to be able to get me back safely, or whether it's just like my only day off that month and I need to capitalize on every second and I need my side imaging and mapping to work flawlessly all day with no interruptions, you need a reliable power source. And that's why I'm running Amped Outdoors lithium batteries. I need my batteries to be high quality. I don't want cheap Amazon batteries that will last me a year and then I'm SOL with no warranty. I need reliable, efficient power, and Amped gives that to me. So I have 2 Amped lithiums in my kayak at all times. I have my 24 volt 50 amp hour and I have my 12 volt 30 amp hour. Those are the only 2 batteries I need to handle everything that I do out on the water. Plus, with my 50 amp hour, I get Bluetooth connectivity, I get heated charging, and all my batteries come with a 10-year no BS warranty from a great family-owned company in Wisconsin that actually stands behind their products. So that's why I and so many anglers these days are choosing Amped Outdoors. And I guess I should probably also mention, they're like half the price of the batteries that I used to use with incredible customer service, features, reliability, and selection. So if you're ready to step up your battery game, you can head over to www.ampedoutdoors.com and check out their full line of batteries, chargers, and power stations. Again, that is www.ampedoutdoors.com.
This is the Tackle Talk Podcast Mailbag, powered by Amped Outdoors, your source for premium, affordable lithium batteries.
All right, the first question here in the mailbag today is from John, who says, "Hey man, I want to run something by you and want to get some input from someone who actually catches fish on jerkbaits. I never throw jerkbaits, but I want to start because I know how effective they are. I have a Dobbins Fury 705 CB that will at least get me started with them. I'm thinking of grabbing 1 or 2 best options. What would you suggest I get as far as jerkbaits go? It's never fun spending $25 on a single lure until you catch a bunch of fish on that lure. So that being said, do you think I should just go straight for the Vision 110? What about color options, deeper or regular diving? Maybe I'm overthinking everything, but I take your opinion seriously, being that we fish the same state. As always, appreciate you, John." Well, hey, John, that is a fun question because you know me, I love jerkbait fishing. It is probably, like I've said before, I think on this show, it's probably one of my strengths as an angler, I think, is just with a jerkbait in my hand. So if you are talking about like, hey, I'm just wanting to get into jerkbaits, cut the BS, what should I buy? Like, I don't care if it's $25 or $5. I want, if I'm going to buy like 2 or 3 baits, what are the best baits to buy? And I'm going to try and cover a little bit of a spectrum here with these 3 baits. So the first bait that you should buy is a Megabass Vision 110. It is the gold standard of jerkbaits, and it has earned that reputation for a reason. It's super responsive. It stops when you want it to stop. It's got great back and forth motion to it. It suspends great. It comes with good hardware right out of the package. Very sticky reverse barb treble hooks that I do like. Now you have to keep in mind that that jerkbait is meant to be thrown on pretty light line. So that's why those hooks that come on those jerkbaits will bend out pretty easily because they are not made to be thrown on, 16-pound line or 18-pound line or something. They're made to be thrown on like, 8, 10, maybe even 12 in some cases pound line. So light line with your Megabass Vision 110. But if you want my recommendation, the Megabass Vision 110 in matte shad would be my number 1. If I was going to go down the 110 lineup, I would also probably pick up a Vision 110 Plus 1 Junior. Matte shad, again, is kind of my go-to, at least if you're going to get one single color. It performs everywhere. But that Vision 110 Plus 1 Junior is a deadly bait and a great complement to just a regular 110. But the regular 110 is the king for a reason. It's an awesome jerkbait. I would definitely pick one of those up to start. My second choice here is going to be a Jackal Re-Range. And I'm going to get that in RT Hollow Minnow. That RT Hollow Minnow has caught me more fish on a Jackal Re-Range than any other color they make. So that's my kind of like soft spot color with the Jackal lineup. But the Re-Range is just a great complement to the Vision 110. The Vision 110 is very finessey. Again, a very quick start and stop type deal. The Jackal Re-Range is a little bit more aggressive. So it's going to have a little bit harder, kind of like slashy sort of cuts to it, where the 110 is just a little bit more of a finessey back and forth sometimes. So Jackal Re-Range, RT Hollow Minnow. And then the number 3 option I'm going to pick up here is the Lucky Craft Pointer 100 SP. I'm going to get that in Ghost Minnow. That 100 SP is going to be just a little bit smaller than your other 2 options for the Vision 110 and the Jackal Re-Range. So you got a little bit of a size difference, which is nice. It's also a much thicker bait. So it's a lot bulkier of a body profile when you're looking at it like straight on. It's just going to be a little bit wider of a jerkbait, and that gives it a different action. Again, it's a little bit more I don't want to call it slow. That's going to sound really dumb, like a slow, lethargic jerkbait, but that's kind of what it is, right? It's a little bit more meandering. It's a little bit more clumsy. And I mean clumsy in like the best way possible, because when you're imitating a dying bait fish, they're not exactly like, quick darting, elusive things, right? Sometimes a dying bait fish looks like a dying bait fish or looks like a fish that's struggling. And I think the 100 SP from Lucky Craft does that. And those are just 3 jerkbaits that will cover a wide range of spectrums and act very different from each other. So you've kind of got like super finessey, middle of the road, not finesse at all in terms of like 110, the Jackal Rig range, and then the Lucky Craft Pointer 100 SP. So those would be my 3 choices if you want to load up your jerkbait box for the first time. All right, the next question here is from Ellis, who says, "Hey, Andrew, my name is Ellis and I'm 9 years old. I love your podcast and I'm obsessed with fishing and listen to your show daily. My mom appreciates your positive messages and insightful product information. I'm turning 10 soon and I'm looking at purchasing a handheld fish finder with a bobber, and I'm curious to know if you think it would be a good investment. If so, which brand would you recommend that is under $100? I'm also getting into bait casting rods and reels, and I'm going after California big bass, and I want to know what type of line and pound test I should use. Appreciate your time. Thank you." Okay, so let's start. First off, Ellis, awesome. It's so fun to hear like from people that are, 9 and 10 years old. It just blows my mind how advanced some of these younger anglers are these days. Very insightful question for a 9-year-old. So kudos to you, Ellis. But to answer your question, as far as handheld fish finders go, are they a good investment? I think that all depends. If you are a bank angler and you have no access to a boat or a kayak, which means no access to any sort of sonar or any place to mount a transducer for a fish finder, then yes, I guess a castable sonar system could be useful, if for nothing else, just to know the depth of the water that you're fishing. Because those castable fish finders, those portable ones, are not going to be great at finding fish, like actually marking fish. I wouldn't bank on it being helpful in that department like at all. So get that part out of your mind to start. But it would be nice to stand on the bank and know exactly how deep the water is that you're casting to. So you can throw that kind of portable fish finder that looks like a bobber out there in the water, and it will at least tell you how deep that water is. And that's great, because I'm guessing if you're just a bank angler, you've been just guessing the whole time about how deep that water actually is, and you've just been kind of fishing blind. Because if I cast out there with that sonar bobber out to the middle of this giant pond that I'm fishing or something, and it says 12 foot or it says 3 foot, those are 2 very different situations. And I'm picking up very different baits, and I'm targeting that water completely different, because in a 12-foot pond, that water column is, 4 times bigger than that 3-foot pond. So you can throw baits that dive a little deeper. You can cover different parts of that water column. In a 3-foot pond, there really is no water column, right? 3 foot is like, I don't know, up to your thigh or your hip or something. So there really is like no bottom, middle, and top. Those fish are living and hunting and kind of looking at all 3 of those feet at once. So there's not really a whole lot of separation in those shallow ponds, where a deeper pond, if it was 12 foot deep, now you can start throwing things like a jerkbait or a crankbait or, a chatterbait that you can get a little bit deeper, or you can throw heavier spinner baits or things like that. So it just opens up a whole different world. Or if you're just casting out like a Texas rig or something, well, the weight that I'm going to choose for a 12-foot pond is going to be very different than a 3-foot pond. A 3-foot pond, I'm going like as light a weight as physically possible, because I don't want to cast that thing and then half a second later it's sitting on the bottom. I do want to have a little bit of fall rate there. So maybe in a 3-foot pond or a 4-foot pond, I'm casting a Texas rig with a worm weight that's like, 3/16 or less, maybe like 1/8. Or if I'm fishing something that's 12 or 15 foot deep, well, now I'm in like the 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce territory. Just all depends on that depth. So yes, I think in that instance, I think it could be very helpful to have some sort of castable, portable sonar, but that's just if you are like relegated to the bank. If you have access to a boat or a kayak or something that you can put an actual transducer on, then I think that they're pretty pointless. To answer your question about what type of line, obviously it depends on the baits you're throwing and what you're using, but a good all-around option for like big California bass, I guess, would be somewhere between, for me, it would be 16 to 20 pound fluorocarbon. It all depends on what you're doing. How big a bass are we talking? I mean, if you're casting like giant Huddlestons on Clear Lake for 10-pound bass, that's very different than casting a drop shot at a local pond for, 3 and 4 pound bass. And line choice will reflect that a little bit. But without knowing your situation, I think maybe like a 16 pound, 18 pound, maybe 20 on like the very high end for just a straight fluorocarbon would be a great place to start. All right, our next question is from Jim, who says, "Hey, Andrew, I love the show. To be honest, I'm not sure why I'm even asking this because I very much prefer the shows where it's just you with no guest, but where are the guest episodes? I feel like it's been quite a while since you've had a guest on." Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I think, I guess I'll go on a little bit of like a tangent here for a second because that's a good question and something that I think about sometimes. I think the solo shows of Tackle Talk are what make this show different. Everybody treats podcasts like just a chance to fire up a microphone and have a conversation with somebody. And that's cool sometimes. But to be honest, a guest episode is just so easy. When you do a guest episode, the guest is talking like 90% of the time. If you're conducting an interview properly, I guess, like you want the guest to be talking way more than you are talking. That's why you're having them on. That's why you're asking them questions, very pointed questions to let them expand and kind of go into some information that maybe you don't have. Those are fun, but they're also, and this isn't going to be the right way to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I feel like that's kind of the lazy way out sometimes, is to source out my content to someone other than me and make them talk and make them fill my show for me. That's what so many people do nowadays, I feel like. And I think that's one of the cool parts about Tackle Talk is that most of the time you sit down and listen to a 45 to 60 minute episode of Tackle Talk, and it's just me. It's just my thoughts, my preparation, me producing a show completely solo. And then if I do a guest episode, I might prep and talk for, I don't know, a few hundred words, maybe total that whole episode. But if I have to fill an hour show by myself, that's probably like, I don't know. I mean, I've never counted, but I mean, that's got to be like 10,000, 15,000, 20,000 words sometimes that I have to formulate with thoughtful content myself. That's tough, but that's also what I love about doing the show. Is I think it's what makes the show unique. I think there aren't many fishing shows, if any fishing shows, that are just out there with one person all the time speaking solo with zero interactions, zero live comments, zero co-hosts or guests. And I just think that's kind of what the special part of Tackle Talk is that you listen to the show and like I'll put our shows up against anybody in the fishing world in terms of like the amount of words and the amount of content you're getting out of one person in such a small period of time, like 30 to 60 minutes, words per minute in terms of like one host. I don't know if there's anybody else that is silly enough to do their show this way. So I think it's part of the charm of Tackle Talk. But with that being said, just a little sneak peek here. I am in the process of recording our very next 4-part series. And this is a series that I've been planning for, probably the better part of 3 or 4 months now. And it's a pain in the tail to coordinate, but I think it's going to be well worth it. It's an idea that I've had for a long time now. Hopefully we'll get that wrapped up for the recording side here in the next 2 weeks, and then we'll get it scheduled to release. It's going to be one of those series where it's not like, the biggest, flashiest names you've ever heard, but I think the premise of this 4-part series is really cool. And I think it's going to open some people's eyes to something that a lot of people think they have an opinion about. And, some might be right and some might be wrong, but I think it'll be really fun to explore it from a different angle. Wink, wink, nod, nod. So we will talk more about that in the coming weeks. But yes, the guest episodes are coming. They're just kind of few and far between. I've really got away from chasing the big name guests or whatever that I definitely used to do really early on in Tackle Talk. I think I've got a lot more confident, a lot more comfortable with myself and with the show and running it by myself and not really just chasing, these giant names so that you can put them in the title or you can put them in, your episode art or something and you can say you talked to this person. Those are very fun, but I think the core part of Tackle Talk is what we're doing in an episode like this. Okay, we have 2 more questions here. The next question here is from Derek, who says, "What action should I get for a jerkbait rod? Some say moderate fast so that the trebles don't rip out so easy, and some say extra fast so it's easier to work the bait. Does the answer change if you're going to use it for top water and maybe some crankbaits too? Like say 70% jerkbaits, 15% top water, 15% crankbaits. Also, have you used your Cashin Element Z2 rod enough to give us a review yet. I'm looking at the jerkbait rod in that lineup, and I'm curious of your thoughts. Okay, Derek, I will give you 2 really quick answers on this, and I'll make them concise. For me, my opinion, I do not like extra fast rods for my jerkbaits. Here's a little juice for you. For me, the magic of a jerkbait is the slack, which everybody knows, working that on slack line, and the give of your setup. That's the part that I think people forget sometimes. Honestly, I want my rod to sort of handicap me a bit, if that makes sense. I actually want it to kind of slow me down. I don't want super crisp, fast, aggressive, snappy jerks of that rod. I want more of kind of whippy cracks in that line. And that delay and that little mush in that setup, to me, is a good thing. And then when I do hook a fish, that more moderate rod helps me keep that fish pinned on really light line with light trebles without overpowering things. So for me, the perfect action is kind of what I would call a moderate fast. I would say 7 foot or less, moderate fast, 8 to 12 pound line, fluorocarbon, straight fluoro. That is my ideal setup. And then for the Cashion Element Z2, I've used it enough to say that I like it, but I also have the medium heavy fast and I don't have the jerkbait stick, so I can't really speak for the action on that rod. All right, and our last question here for the day is from John, who says, "Hey, Andrew, I've enjoyed your podcast since the beginning, and it's been my favorite all this time. My question is this: how do you work a chatterbait? I can't catch a fish on them to save my life. Most of the water I fish in Western Colorado is very clear. Could that be the reason why bladed jigs don't work here? Thanks, and keep up the good work." Okay, here we go. This is a great question to end on today. Thank you for submitting it, John. Thank you for listening since the very beginning. I appreciate that a ton. How do you work a chatterbait? That is a loaded question. I think most people just put a paddle tail swim bait on the back as a trailer and they cast and they reel. They treat it like a mindless chuck and wind bait. And I think that's a mistake. I definitely think you can catch fish doing that. I've caught a ton of fish doing that over my life, just chucking and winding a chatterbait. But if you want to master the chatterbait, there's way more to it than that. So let's start with the trailer. Yes, you can use a paddle tail swim bait. That's a very popular trailer, like a Kitech or a Strike King Rage swimmer, something like that. That'll give your bait a very sterile, very stable, less erratic action. Slow and steady. That's what you're getting with a swim bait trailer, like a traditional swim bait, I guess, on the back of a chatterbait. But instead, try a straight tail minnow. Try a spunk shad from Hog Farmer or a Rapala freeloader. I mean, try a fluke, for goodness sakes. Anything out there, we've got all of these scoping minnows that everybody's coming out with today. Yes, you can throw those on a Demiki rig or a ball head or something. You can also throw them on the back of a chatterbait and they work awesome. Just try something that doesn't have so much wag to that tail, because what that does is it makes that chatterbait a lot more erratic when you don't have that big boot tail on there. You want the chatterbait to do what a chatterbait does best, which is hunt. And hunt is a fancy way of saying that it becomes less predictable and it gets a lot more of a mind of its own. A chatterbait is one of those baits that hunts really well with the right trailer. And then you have other options that are very forgot about too. You can throw craws on the back of a chatterbait. I feel like people completely forget about that as an option sometimes, and you shouldn't. With a little heavier chatterbait, like a 1/2 ounce or heavier that you can keep down a little bit, a craw is a deadly combination. Now, if you have too light of a chatterbait and you rig a craw the traditional way, it will want to keep that bait up toward the top a little bit, so it will help it rise. Sometimes that's good if you want to keep it over weeds. Sometimes it's bad if you want to get a little bit deeper. Something like a straight tail minnow will get that same chatterbait just a little bit deeper because those appendages on that craw do want to help it kind of stay up and give it a little bit more lift. So vary your trailers. I would say that is the first thing that I would recommend that you do. The other thing that you need to do is vary your retrieve. So instead of just reeling it slow and steady at a constant speed, there's 2 things that you want to mix in: pulses and pauses. Pulses are those kind of intermittent, quick jolts of that bait. So you give that reel a really quick half turn in the middle of your retrieve, or you pull the rod really fast just to give it a bit of a pulse, just enough to trigger a fish that's either tracking that bait or looking at that bait or hasn't really decided to commit yet. You can also pulse when you're going in and out of weeds to clear that blade. And I can't tell you how many times on a chatterbait I have caught fish when I felt weeds and I felt that blade stop moving You give it a really hard tug to clear those weeds and to chop kind of through them. And then all of a sudden, bam, fish hits it right on that big, fast chug of that chatterbait. So that's something that you don't want to overlook. But then there are the pauses. So don't be afraid to kill that bait for 1, 2, 3 seconds at a time. You're reeling, and then you kill it. And then you pick back up and you start reeling again. And then you give it maybe a little pulse or two. And then you reel it for a little bit. And then you stop for a second. And then you give a quick pause. And then you reel again. Then you pulse. Then you pulse. Then you reel. That's how you start to build a cadence and a retrieve that becomes something completely different than just chucking and winding that bait. So those are a couple things that I would recommend you try if you're struggling with chatterbaits. A lot of people struggling with chatterbaits just think you cast them out and you reel them at a steady speed. That'll work sometimes, but if you talk to some of the best chatterbait anglers on the planet, they're going to tell you vary your retrieve, vary your trailers. Do not just treat this as a mindless chuck and wind bait. All right, everybody, that is our episode today. I appreciate you all. Thank you for spending your Tuesday with us, or Wednesday or Thursday or whenever you're listening to this. But if you're listening to this when it came out on Tuesday, thank you for spending your Tuesday with us. If you have any questions, anything I can help with, like I said, I'm an open book. I'm happy to chat. Shoot me a DM on Instagram or Facebook. You can also email me, tackletalkpodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on our website, tackletalkpodcast.com. You can go to tackletalkpodcast.com/mailbag to submit a mailbag question. You can go to tackletalkpodcast.com/fishing poll to participate in next week's fishing poll. And with that, I will leave you for this week, and I will see you next Tuesday for another brand new episode of Tackle Talk.
Thank you for listening to the Tackle Talk podcast. Tackle Talk is produced by Andrew Hayes. Copyright 2019. For more, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.